Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are very pleased to welcome you back from our holiday break to the start of what will be, believe it or not, our 13th year of the Volpe Report. Sorry for the cliche, but it's really hard to grasp where all that time has gone. A long time ago, I had thought 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, a semester in Italy, and 3 years of law school was a long time. However, that isn't even the 13 years I've just talked about for this show. Isn't it amazing as you get older how time seems to speed up? First, I hope all of you had a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year. A lot has happened in the world since 2026 began, even though we're only in the middle of January. We've conducted a major military operation in South America, capturing the narco-terrorist dictator Nicolás Maduro, completely upsetting the geopolitical balance of power in the world. While on the other side of the world, watching daily the implosion and apparent collapse of the brutal theocracy in Iran is amazing. We are clearly living in a time in history when the world is creasing the memory, and what happens now can affect the world for literally decades to come. That is why we are very pleased to welcome today's guest, our United States Senator Dave McCormick. I will do a short version of his credentials as they are specifically relevant to today's show. Dave spent most of his formative years, you'll remember, in Bloomsburg, growing up on campus of Bloomsburg University, where his father, James, was president of Bloomsburg University, as well as chancellor, becoming eventually Chancellor Emeritus of the Pennsylvania System of Higher Education. Dave received an appointment to West Point Military Academy, where he graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. He was a four-time letterman and co-captain of the Army wrestling team. Upon graduation from the military academy, of course, he entered the United States Army, becoming an honor graduate of the Airborne Ranger School. Dave then joined the 82nd Airborne Division. And if you fast forward, that's the very same division that was an integral part of the recent Venezuelan operations. How about that? Back when Dave was deployed in the Gulf War in the 82nd Airborne Division, he became the XO of a combat engineering company tasked with clearing minefields, no less, as well as destroying enemy munitions plants. For this, Dave received the coveted Bronze Star for valor in combat. Upon completion of his military service, he resumed his education, earning his Ph.D. from Princeton University in international relations. Again, how relevant is that to what's going on in the world? Since you also know he happens to be serving on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That means he's been getting classified briefings from the president, from Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, from Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, from John Ratcliffe, who was the director of the CIA, as well as General Daniel Kane, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. With the background he has in military service, 82nd Airborne Division that was deployed in Venezuela, as well as his Ph.D. from Princeton in International Relations, how relevant is that? Oh, by the way, he serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. There can be no better guest to be on today's show to talk about what's going on in the world. Back to his credentials, because I cut them short. He actually served as an undersecretary in the administration of George W. Bush in the Department of the Treasury. And in that capacity became a principal advisor to the actual Treasury Secretary, Henry Paulson. Dave would then become a Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economic Policy. Again, directly relevant to what's going on in the world right now. As you know from the advertisements about the show, this is a two-part show. This is obviously going to be part one. And on today's show, we will discuss the aforementioned military operation in Venezuela, as well as the ramifications for Latin America as a whole and South America. as well as the effect of the collapse of the communist dictatorship in Venezuela and what that means for Cuba, which has been a thorn in America's side for over 60 years, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. This all impacts the changing geopolitical balance in the world, which is why today's show is particularly relevant. And the fact that we have an expert in all of these matters with a bird's eye view, not just the fact that he's a U.S. Senator, but the fact that he sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We think you'll enjoy the education of today's show.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Senator, welcome back to the Volpe Report.
Hey, Chuck. Great to be with you as always. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And what a great segue with the last words you spoke, New Year. We're only halfway through January. And as you and I briefly discussed, it seems like the world is on fire right now. It's breaking. You know, history, when it breaks sometimes, Dave, as you know, it like happens in chunks to the point you're remembering where you were when, you know, we were barely into the first round of the college football playoffs, and there's breaking news, and we have a major military operation in Venezuela, a successful one, because we don't get to find out till you see their narco-terrorist dictator, president, I use that term loosely, president, Nicolás Maduro in cuffs with his wife on American soil. And you know, as I'm watching this, literally telling you the absolute truth, I'm thinking to myself, I have to reach out to my good friend, Senator Dave McCormick, because if there's any senator out of the 100 of them, like that touches all the bases from your experience back to the previous administrations where you were very high up, sub-cabinet level effectively, positions. You're a West Point graduate. The extraction heavily involved the 82nd Airborne, a famous unit in military history back to World War II. You were a proud member of the 82nd Airborne. They were involved in an operation so meticulous that we did all of this. We didn't lose one American life. Not one drop of American blood was spilled. And I thought to myself when all that was going on, I have to call Senator McCormick to see if we can get him on the show to talk about, oh, by the way, I forgot, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which means you're getting classified briefings from the President, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, General Kane, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, probably Ratcliffe, the CIA Director, was in those meetings. So wow, so thank you for making time. You've been all over national news, all over the place, obviously, to come here to northeastern and central Pennsylvania to talk to the folks. So let's start with that. Thank you for coming.
It's coming home, Chuck. As you know, I'm from Bloomsburg, so that's
of course you're right in the media market,
my friend. Listen, I'm so glad to be with you, and I agree with you. We had a classified briefing last week with Chairman Kane, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Secretary Hegseth, Rubio, Ratcliffe, the CIA Director. And General Kane went through that operation in Venezuela. It was a tick-tock. This happened at 12:02. The helicopters crossed the LD. 2 minutes later, it was riveting. It was like a Tom Clancy novel. And it was the most magnificent military operation that I've seen in my lifetime. It was less than 2 hours on the ground, a military operation into Venezuela, the heart of Caracas, the capital, on a military base where through a combination of our sea capability, our drone capability, our air capability, we were able to circumvent and destroy the air defense operations, land, extract Maduro and his wife, and get back off the ground. Less than 2 hours. A couple people picked up some shrapnel, no serious injuries. A remarkable operation. Yes. Remarkable. Just so proud. It was Delta Force. It was the 82nd and others. It was so proud to have seen this. I want to step back for a second and say, let's not lose sight of why we're there. The reason we're there, and President Trump had given Maduro every opportunity to exit the country. The reason we're there is he is an indicted criminal, a narco terrorist, an illegitimate leader, And Venezuela is a transshipment hub where the narcotics that are coming into Pennsylvania, the fentanyl, the cocaine elsewhere, are supported by those narco terrorist groups. It's a place where Iran, where the IGC, where the terrorists have safe haven in partnership with Maduro. It's a place that's giving oil to Iran, to Russia, to our adversaries, China. And this was a chance in our backyard. This is a couple hundred miles from the coast of Florida. We're going to make the changes necessary to protect Americans. And I got a lot of admiration for President Trump for having the courage to do it. It was a remarkable operation. We got a lot of work to do. We're now in that was phase one, beautifully executed. We're now headed to phase two. And the goals of phase two are very straightforward. Number one, kill the transshipment hub of drugs. Number two, stop Venezuela being a safe haven for our adversaries. Three, rebuild the oil industry. Venezuela has 17% of the world's oil reserves. It only exports less than 1%. It's a huge asset for Venezuela, the Venezuelan people, for America, for the Western Hemisphere. We got to get that oil industry up and running. It was destroyed by socialism and communism. And then finally, we got to have a path to a democratic self-governance in Venezuela. So that's going to take place. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'd give it the next few years of the Trump administration. I think most of that will be done before the president leaves office. But a remarkable moment, and we saw it firsthand.
Well, let's stair step a bit and start at ground zero, effectively, in Caracas. We currently have an interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. The first thing that came out of our president's statement was that we are going to run Venezuela. Of course, I immediately knew that that's not literally what he meant, but we are going to have influence in Venezuela. So can you break down, to the extent that it's not classified, of course, like right off the top, Dave, what comes to my mind, you've touched on so much. If we effectively seize the oil fields, we have a chance to literally bring China to its knees. Because for all the land mass that's China, one thing they're not in abundance there is all of the Marcellus Shale and oil and all, like Russia has, for example, in abundance. We have an abundance. South America has an abundance, and that's just the way it is. So there are geopolitical ramifications, obviously. But so let's start there. How do we proceed? I understand a lot of it would be classified. We're not going to get to know. You know. But what you can tell us about, again, let's start in Caracas. What's the government like there now with Delcy Rodriguez running it? And what's the level of cooperation? And what's the immediate plan in terms of managing Caracas and Venezuela first? Yeah.
Well, you made the point up front. I think it was Selena Zito that said, always take President Trump seriously, not literally.
Of course. I get a charge. I have to interrupt. The Democrats, they're like, you know what they're like, Dave? You know, you learned about Pavlov's dog, right?
Yeah.
You know, you ring the bell and they start salivating. You train them. Yeah. They're like trained seals. No, lemmings is a better word. As soon as he says something, they jump all over it literally. And the American people know better. Everybody with a brain knows better. But sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
Well, you said the right point, leverage. Leverage is, and there's two sources of leverage. One source of leverage is it is an oil economy. So, unfortunately, Venezuela's become impoverished under the leadership of Maduro. So 80% of the people live below the poverty line. But the primary economic driver is oil, the exports they have. And as you said, they export it to Iran, to China, to other places, to Cuba. And so the first thing that we can do is take control of those oil exports. We can direct those in concert with the Venezuelans to non-sanctioned countries. They pay a cheaper price because they're sanctioned countries. It goes up to a higher market price, and that generates a lot of revenue that can be used to reconstitute the oil industry. But that only happens if the government cooperates. So we have a chokehold on the only economic driver, which is oil. So that's the first source of leverage. And if those leaders that you mentioned don't work hand in hand with the United States, then they know that economic leverage will be applied. The second thing is, as we just commented on, we sent troops in the middle of the night into Caracas, were able to grab the indicted criminal. There were other people indicted. We didn't grab them. We certainly have the capacity to grab them, and that's been demonstrated. So I think we're going to get a good bit of cooperation. And my understanding from Secretary Rubio, who I just saw recently, was that we're getting good cooperation from the vice president. We're getting good cooperation from the leadership. We know where they are. We know who they are. We know, when they go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. We know everything we need to know, and that puts us in a position of strength. So that's the starting point. So we need cooperation. We're going to get that. But the second thing is this oil industry is a complete basket case. It's an utter disaster. And the only way we're going to reconstitute that is if we get a bunch of capital to come in. That is what the meeting that President Trump had with the oil executives was about, to bring investment into Venezuela to develop those fields. Those oil industry execs are a little worried because their property got expropriated 30 years ago, where the Venezuelans took control of it. So what they want is certainty that there's going to be a path here where there's going to be rule of law. And if they invest in Venezuela, they're going to benefit from it along with the Venezuelan people. So the second thing we have to do is create enough stability that investors are willing to invest in the United States in its current position. I think is going to play a really important role in that.
Well, again, wonderful information. So let's now go make our concentric circles. We'll go to a ring larger than that. Now we'll step outside of Venezuela. By the way, one final point I think needs to be heard. Overwhelming majority, by the millions of Venezuelans, are cheering what the United States did. You won't see it on some of the, the network media, legacy media, but everywhere else, by the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands cheering America in the street for freeing them from the tyranny of that dictatorship. Legacy
Chuck,
media doesn't like to talk about it.
The one thing I want to mention, which is just it's the cynicism of the Democrats on this. As you said, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division. I was there in 1989. In 1989, the president was George Bush, 41, and he chose to deploy the 82nd Airborne Division and others to go to Panama. I was not part of that. It was a different brigade.
You went to Iraq. You went to the Gulf.
I went to Iraq later. They jumped into Panama. 25,000 troops on the ground to arrest and eventually capture, after 10 days, Manuel Noriega, an indicted narco terrorist. Does that sound familiar, Chuck?
Yeah, it does.
23 Americans killed in action on the battlefield in Panama. They brought him back to Americans' courts. He was prosecuted, spent the rest of his life in jail until, I guess, 5 years ago or so, but 25 years in jail. At the time, there was a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate. They applauded George Bush 41. They applauded the fact that he had taken this action. He didn't trigger the War Powers Resolution. He didn't give advance warning to the Congress. It was an exact replica of what President Trump did, and the opposing party cheered him on. That's the difference. Here we are 35 years later. That's the difference, and it's a real shame. I think the Democrats are trying to make politics out of this, and this was a real step to protect the American people.
Dave, don't they make politics out of everything? Is there anything they don't? To the point where I hope the American people at some point, in their living room, in their families, in their dinner table discussions, for the first time in my life, it definitely feels like we used to be able to come together as a country when we were engaged with foreign adversaries, and there was a great deal of patriotism after 2001, the terrorist attack of the Twin Towers. It seemed like half of America, the blue half, the Democratic half, is cheering for our country to fail, Senator.
Yeah.
Am I missing something? When they go down and they have margaritas with Brago Garcia, when in his state a woman was killed by a GS-13 gang member, and President Trump had her in it. Like, at what point do you cheer for America to succeed, which benefits all Americans?
Yep.
They were willing to hurt Americans during their government shutdown. Democratic constituencies couldn't get food stamps, for Christ's sake. That's a subject for another day. as our time runs out, let's go to a larger circle now. Let's look at the immediate surrounding area. So making sure I pronounce names and get them. Let's first look at Nicaragua, President Daniel Ortega, who shut down the U.S. Embassy, I think. And then right not far away in Colombia, we have President Gustavo Petro, quote to Trump, "I dare you to come and get me." So we have some of that stuff going on. I saved Cuba for last. They get their own special topic. But just your comment on, I know there are other countries there cheering us on, the ones that have freedom and our democratic republic.
Argentina, Ecuador, Uruguay.
Of course. The majority, I would say. But we have a few recalcitrant communist dictatorships there, effectively. Probably, I can't say narco-terrorists because maybe they haven't been officially designated. But to me, that's still the number one export. So talk a little bit about some of our friends down there that aren't so thrilled with what happened.
Well, the president's national security strategy was a very interesting document. It's the first time in my lifetime there's been a document from the national security strategy that said the Western Hemisphere is a special priority. It said that, listen, we want to project American power around the world to protect America's interests, but there's a special emphasis on our backyard. And the reason for that is threats in our backyard, whether it's narco-terrorism, these drug cartels, which are paramilitary organizations, Chuck. These drug cartels have drones and helicopters and anti-aircraft weapons. These are paramilitary organizations. Places that give safe haven to our adversaries, to terrorists, in our backyard are of special concern. And we're not going to tolerate it, was what the national security strategy said. We are not going to tolerate that. Now, I've seen a lot of national security strategies come and go. What's different about this one is the president has now executed on it. He said he was going to do this during the campaign. I said the same thing. We're going to go after the narco-terrorists. We're going to declare them the terrorists they are. And we're going to secure the border, and we're going to use our military to go after them selectively. That's what the president is doing. And I think what's happened as a result of Venezuela in the Western Hemisphere, those three countries in particular, we've sent a message. The message is the president means what he says and does what he says, number one. Number two, if you are doing something that put American lives at peril, watch out. Number three is we have the most sophisticated military capability in the world. If you doubted it after the Iran operation where we took out those nuclear weapons, I don't know how you could not see it now with this incredible operation. We have the military capability to come after you and get you. So behave. That is the message. There's a one more message is particularly relevant to Cuba, which is Venezuela. Cuba has been tottering for decades. The main source of economic support has been Venezuela. And that's also coming to a screeching halt. So I don't think there's any, I can't speak for the president, but I don't see any desire to change governments across the Western Hemisphere. That should be a byproduct of protecting America's interest. And I think those countries are on watch.
No question. Let's now, as they said, they get their own topic, Cuba. We have here a couple of the points I made. I want to cover all of them. Well, first of all, we're talking about Manuel Diaz-Canel, the president, dictator, successor to Fidel Castro of Cuba, not a friend of the United States, obviously. He's been very belligerent as well, but there's a difference with Cuba. First of all, they are, to me, the hub, the center, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's where our adversaries, our communist dictatorships, obviously Russia now falls back into that category, China, they get safe haven. And obviously they love the idea that 60 or 90 miles from our shore, they have, it's the middle finger to the United States. And they've been that for 60 years, as I said, all the way back to the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So now, having said that, they have a problem now, from my view, without classified briefings. One is, they also have the problem, they're in a part of South America, if you will, island off the coast. They don't have the oil reserves. They are energy dependent on Venezuela that now happens to fall. How about that? If President John F. Kennedy were still alive, he would say, you have a historic opportunity here that I didn't even have, basically. So, yes, they're dependent right now. My understanding is they're already have blackouts. They have times when they have to shut everything down, and that's not going to get it any better. And because of the hit and the pressure on their economy now, they should be watching the television Iran, I think, in Cuba, because I think that might be coming. But again, that's just from what I see from afar. Could you talk to that issue now?
I'm glad I'm glad you said it that way, because in the end, the biggest challenges Venezuela has, Cuba has, and Iran has, which we'll turn to in a minute, is that they are suppressing their people, that they don't have freedom, and that they have not been able to deliver opportunity and economic well-being. And so you've got two pressures. You've got the pressure from the outside. They're not getting the oil, the lack of benefactors. Cuba's been the beneficiary of support from Russia, which has dried up, the support from Venezuela. So they got the pressure from the outside, but they got the pressure from the inside because they're not serving the people. And so, with those two pressures, I think it's probably a matter of time that you see governments collapse. And that was what was happening in Venezuela. 10 years ago, Venezuela had 40 million people. Today, it has 32 million people, 8 million left. And the 32 million people that are there were celebrating in the streets when Maduro was gone. So I think you see a lot of pressure. And I know we got a lot to talk about. If I could turn to Iran, Chuck, may I do so?
Please.
Yeah, may I do so? Because I think that as we're doing this tour of the world, that may be the single most significant thing that's happening.
Well, regrettably, as we are really getting on a roll there, we have to break off because we've run through already our half-hour show. So that concludes part one of the show. We look forward to seeing you next week for part two, in which we will, in fact, get into the collapse of of effectively the Middle East power structure as revolution rages in Iran, and what that means for the geopolitical balance of the world. So we'll be back next week to get into the Iranian conflict and what all that means for us. We'll see you next week with Dave McCormick for part two.
There are more places you can watch the Volpe Report, your premier political talk show. Tune in to Fox 56 every Sunday morning at 10:30 as we bring prominent national and state officials right into your living room. Or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report, where you get full access to all of our episodes, wherever you are. Our guests are the newsmakers, the decision makers, the people who shape the policies that affect us all. We dive deep into what matters most to Pennsylvanians with in-depth interviews that give you the full picture. We're dedicated to providing you with unfiltered, thought-provoking conversations. Whether it's local policy, national politics, or everything in between, we're right here to break it down and keep you informed. So wherever you want to watch, the Volpe Report is always here for you, delivering everything you need to know in today's political landscape.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.